Hey, so this is the fourth time I'm trying this. Note to self, never make homemade bread because everyone will come and ask if they can have some. So yeah, I've been interrupted a few times. So this is a book tag. This is something I've been meaning to do for a little while, so I'm just going to get it done. It's going to be quite boring, I won't lie. It's a great idea, this was a great book. Johnny Got His Gun, had never heard of it beforehand. Very glad I have read it, regardless of how mad it made me. But what I'm going to do is read the review that I wrote. I tend to do that when I write, I read a book. I tend to write one afterwards. So I'm just going to read it out. I'm probably going to elaborate in places. You'll know when I'm reading and when I'm not, I presume. So, alright, here goes. Johnny Got His Gun. For someone that's not read it, think of this. You can think, and your skin can feel, but your eyes can't see, and your ears can't hear, and your mouth can't speak. Without knowing why Joey Bonham is like this, you can understand the torment, and you may even be able to imagine what you'd be thinking in his shoes. He doesn't even have shoes. At least initially you would understand. I imagine it would take you to actually being in that kind of scenario to really understand it. Some people might think it's an artistic concept, if they weren't to actually think that some people are in this scenario. If you add the reason as to why Joey is in this position, it becomes a political and sociological discussion. I also think it's a psychological discussion. Joey got blown to bits in World War I and was left as a torso that cannot communicate or perceive the world around him other than moving his head and feeling his skin. That's about as spoilerish as this review gets, I think. So, okay, let's continue. A book like this must be delved into as if you are the character, and you can compassionately understand. You may find other characters in his flashbacks that you associate with more. I read a review from a mother who'd lost her son in the Iraq War who felt for and understood the untold story of Joey's mother. What the mum would have been thinking on hearing that her son was lost in combat, but not knowing whether he was or wasn't alive. I didn't think that was what this reviewer should have focused on, but considering what she's been through, it's hardly surprising. I'd rather think that knowing Joey's position, you'd more be contemplating what you'd be thinking and feeling in that position and comparing that with what Joey goes through. For all that Joey doesn't move or go anywhere, he undertakes the greatest mental challenge. Being stuck there. Stuck in the mind. It's impressive to me that Dalton Trumbo can have sat thinking for such a long time about what it would feel like to be body-bound. I use that term for my mother. She's a carer and a psychologist who works with the elderly. She's no stranger to what we call palliative care. For anyone who doesn't understand what that is, it's the care of someone on their deathbed. The word actually means to soothe or to calm. That's what I was thinking about through the book, along with my own feelings about the military and its intertwining with politics. I was thinking about the conversation we'd had about what it would be like to be body-bound. From the point of view from a carer, my mum, she taught me that the parameters of care are more complex. Things like trying to communicate with the person, trying to assess how much cognitive ability is still present, and trying to give them a quality of life. This book went a step further and made this patient near impossible to care for, and therefore body-bound becomes unimaginable hell. When I say quality of life, what I mean is a carer, a nurse, will try and interact with the person, even if the responses are minimal. They'll tell them about what's going on, they'll talk about the news, they'll tell them about the family that's visiting, anything to try and give them stimuli from the environment. I questioned myself on whether it would be better to be as stuck as Joey was, with no tantalising reminders of the world you're missing, as would be done in trying to give the patient a quality of life that I discussed with my mum, or whether the isolation Joey was in would be worse than having that opportunity. I was comparing if the nurses didn't try and do that and you couldn't interact in that way at all, like Joey was, would that be more maddening than being told what's going on and not being able to get involved? Trumbo and his character development taught me that even without the stimuli that I know carers employ, you still miss the world you had and can't interact with. I conclude from the book that if you were in either position, Joey's scenario or one where you can still see or hear, for example, you would only be able to see your own trouble. That is to say, you wouldn't ever be able to think, well, it could be worse, because the pain of what you're enduring would be too great. It's a concept of relativity. That was the part I thought Trumbo did beautifully. That is not to say that this book didn't make me mad for other reasons. And here it goes. That is, I was mad because there were certain feelings that Joey expressed that I didn't agree with. Part of me thought that perhaps I would come to his same conclusions if I were in that position. Then I reminded myself that Dalton Trumbo hadn't been in that position either. The story was a platform for his political dislike of war. I don't understand Trumbo's way of saying we cannot question fighting for liberty. I do question people's idea of liberty, and understand people's different opinion of what that is, and that they still have a right to that kind of liberty, whichever it is they want. For example, in the Middle East, they think they should be allowed Sharia law. That's their freedom. To them, that is freedom. It's freedom to be Muslim. I think it's important to defend other people's right to think and feel, even if you don't even agree with what it is that they think and feel. I think it's important to defend other people's right to freedom, to be as and who they are, even if you don't like what that is, as long as they're not bothering you. There's plenty of world for all of us. Religion does defy this because it's persistent. It busybodies itself in other people's lives, but that's another thing I don't like. I would defend their right to believe in bullshit, but I will not defend them in invading on other people. That's where my views sound contradictory, but only because here's where my view on war gets complicated. I'm not fond of invasion, but neither am I fond of sitting back and doing nothing. There is no fine line or black and white in war, but right and wrong still remain. It is a violent method of achieving a political means. That's its military definition. A violent method and a political means. So to say that the two aren't one and the same is daft. Trumbo seems to think that, governments fighting for liberty and sending people to war is two separate entities. People are their government. You might not vote for them, but you still get controlled by them, and war is just another way for them to do that. So what he doesn't agree with is people being controlled by the government, the true idea of liberty. So on that front, sure, he's right. As well as governments' good intentions in fighting for liberty, I also note their utter failings. Where the idea of protecting liberty fails is where the allies that get involved stopped fighting for it and started fighting purely for their own gain. The recent wars being a prime example. When they say, "Come along, son, we're going to war," you be damn straight in questioning as to why. When people lie to you, regardless of how stretched the lie is, there still will be some truth in it. If there weren't any truth in it, it wouldn't hold. You cannot convince so many people just to do something on a complete lie. What you can do is convince that many people to go to war on a half lie. Only when your country has stretched its arm to war are its lies like butter spread over too much bread, and in doing so its flaws of not being enough pizzazz for fighting for liberty are revealed. For anyone who doesn't get it, belief in liberty in that metaphor is the butter. Don't think soldiers are so stupid, or that the governments are so evil. They're only being human. When good intentions turn into selfishness, ask the question again. Don't think you can't, as Trumbo seemed to think. He was persecuted when McCarthyism was around, so that makes sense that he didn't think he could question the government. Just as Joey wants to show the world what war does, people should strive to understand why it happens. Always be prepared to distrust your government and ask, why? 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 Yeah, I think I'm being cool by quoting the book at the end, but it made sense. I hope. And if there's any questions, go ahead and ask. PM, comment. I will always answer. Thanks.